If you are having any technical difficulties joining us on WebEx, you may also live stream this event at facebook.com/myglendale, youtube.com/myglendale, or on Glendale's public access channel GTV6 on Charter Channel 6 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99. We are going to jump right into our program and invite Glendale Mayor Vrej Aghajanyan to say a few words to welcome you to this year's event.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the City of Glendale and my council colleagues, thank you all for joining us virtually for this important occasion to honor and remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When we reflect on the work of an exceptional leader like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we are reminded of his dedication to end racial and economic inequalities by working to bring communities together. By standing in solidarity with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Glendale City Council adopted a Sundown Town resolution on September 15, 2020, condemning and apologizing for any racially motivated, discriminatory, or exclusionary aspects of our city's history. This was a historic achievement, one that was necessary in order to continue to embrace racial equality throughout our community. Additionally, this past Tuesday, the Glendale City Council issued a proclamation declaring January 18th as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the city of Glendale in support of racial and social equality. Lastly, I'd like to pay tribute to the late John Lewis for his civil rights activism. Along Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he too was an important historic figure and a giant among the civil rights leaders for bringing forth racial equality, and his legacy too will never be forgotten. I would like to thank the Martin Luther King Jr. Togetherhood Planning Committee, the YWCA and YMCA of Glendale, and Dignity Health Glendale Memorial Hospital for hosting this event in collaboration with the City of Glendale. I hope you all enjoy the rest of this event and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Aghajanyan and Glendale Council members. I'd also like to acknowledge our local dignitaries who are joining us today. We have Senator Portantino, Mary Hovagimian representing Congressman Adam Schiff, Victoria Doshkalian representing Assembly Member Laura Friedman, and Jason Maruka representing Supervisor Catherine Barger. Thank you all for being with us. Now, please join me in welcoming and introducing our sponsors and the Togetherhood Planning Committee members. Tara Peterson, CEO, YWCA Glendale. Reverend Kathleen McCarty, Director of Mission Integration, Dignity Health, Glendale Memorial Hospital. Eliza Papazian, Public Information Officer, City of Glendale. Gary Schaefer, Director of Library, Arts and Culture, City of Glendale. Celine Manukian, Communications, City of Glendale. George Cycli, CEO, Glendale YMCA. Each year, the Planning Committee members come together to plan an inspiring commemoration of Dr. King to celebrate his life and legacy. The purpose of the Togetherhood celebration is to highlight what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his teachings mean to us and how we can all apply it to better our lives and communities for the future. At this time, it is my honor to introduce a dear colleague and friend, Reverend Kathleen McCarty, who will be introducing our keynote speaker, Reverend Dr. Marks.
Thank you so much, Tagui. And it is also my honor to introduce Reverend Dr. Bryant Marks. Dr. Marks is a minister, researcher, trainer, and award-winning educator. He is the founder and chief equity officer of the National Training Institute on Race and Equity and a tenured professor of psychology at Morehouse College. He served on President Obama's Board of Advisors with the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans and as senior advisor with the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. Dr. Marks was also a contributor and trainer with the Obama administration's My Brother's Keeper and 21st Century Policing programs. Between 2017 and 19, Dr. Marks provided implicit bias training to over 40,000 employees and volunteers in law enforcement, city, county, and federal government, corporations, education, and healthcare. Clients include the Los Angeles Police Department, New York City Department of Education, Kaiser Permanente, Google, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Dr. Marks holds a BA in psychology and a minor in economics from Morehouse College, and an MA and PhD in social psychology from the University of Michigan. Dr. Marks conducts research and professional development in the areas of diversity and implicit bias, Black male psychology and development, and personal passion and productivity. Dr. Marks is married to Dr. Kimberly Marks and is father to Kim, Zion Trinity, and Bryant II. And if I may add, I am so grateful for also being trained by Dr. Marks. He trained managers and several of our staff here at Glendale Memorial in implicit bias, and we're very, very grateful to learn from you, Dr. Marks. So it's my privilege and pleasure to have you speak now to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you to the team, to everybody that put this together. I bring you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm in the Southeast. I'm in Fulton County. So for those following the elections and so forth, Fulton County may sound familiar. And we just had somewhat of a contested senatorial sort of process a couple of weeks ago. Actually, John Lewis was my congressman. And I'll talk a little bit more about my connection with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King shortly. So what I like to do here is if I can share my screen. I need sharing privileges. So if we could just give me the ability to share my screen. I think we're close. All right, thank you so much. All right, folks, you all know technology, so we are adjusting. There we go. I got that. All right, wonderful. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So there's a variety of things I could have talked to you about, but I'm going to focus on a concept called implicit bias. I think it sort of relates because we're trying to do a variety of things. Dr. King talked about the beloved community and folks getting along in from different sectors and backgrounds. For those who didn't know, Martin Luther King, that's him right here. This is when he was a student at Morehouse College, also my alma mater, and also where I serve as a professor. All right, so Martin Luther King Jr. went to undergrad at Morehouse, graduate school at Boston University. All right, wonderful. Now, as we get into this though, I need everybody looking at the screen. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to flash an image on the screen. It's going to be really, really quick. And then afterwards, I want you to think about what you saw, your initial impression of what you saw, all right? So everybody looking at the screen, and let me see here. Hopefully, you all can give me a thumbs up just to make sure it comes through. I'll make sure it's slow. All right, so everybody looking, here we go, somewhat quickly, here we go. What'd you see? Now, you're gonna say you saw a face, okay? Now, was the face looking straight ahead or to the side? Straight ahead or to the side? And what direction was that face looking? Now, we get a mix of responses usually in terms of your initial impression. But everybody, let's look again, because some folks are saying straight ahead, some are saying to the side. Can you see both possibilities now? Here's the deal. Two people can look at the same person or the same situation and see something completely different. As a matter of fact, one person could look at another person or a situation, have an initial impression, and then have what we call an aha moment, right? Aha, I see the other possibility. Now, your aha moment, few seconds. but in certain cases, it may be a few hours, days, weeks, months, or even years. It's all a matter of perspective. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is perspective taking, not only from the perspective of Glendale citizens, Dignity Health, a variety of stakeholders we have here, but also elected officials and a variety of other folks who have a stake in this thing that we call implicit or unconscious bias. All right, so you hear those terms, implicit bias, the more scientific term, unconscious bias, the more popular term, they mean the same thing, okay? All right, now, so the hidden biases of good people, implications for individuals and organizations. So by being in a session like this, when we talk about this topic around race or bias or gender bias, whatever the case is, just because you're familiar with these things, it may be a bit uncomfortable, I understand. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Even good people can form biases, not because it's something they've done wrong, but it's part of the human condition. So that's what we're going to unpack for you all right now. Okay. So where are we going in our short time together? This is going to be a lightning presentation, action-packed. You don't want to miss any minute. Our questions of the day. So I'm a college professor, so these are our learning goals. So by the end of our time together today, you should be able to answer the following questions in your own words, time permitting. What is implicit bias? What does it look like in the real world? I'm going to give you some real world and research experience, examples. How does it affect the targeted bias, implicit bias? Why does it exist? We're going to talk about the causes of bias, both implicit and explicit. How is it measured? We'll talk about that. And finally, how can it be managed or reduced at the individual and organizational levels? That's why I'm going to give you some homework, okay? I'll give you at least 10 things you can do starting today to identify, manage, or mitigate your bias, whatever that might be, okay? So you got to hang with me, but all the content will fall underneath these 6 questions. All right, so here we go. I do want to start off with a scenario. Now, some of you may have heard this scenario before. So if you have, just smile in your silent brilliance and nod your head. I've heard this before, okay? But for those of you who have not heard this before, here we go. So a father and his son are driving. It's late at night. It's raining pretty hard. Roads are really slippery. Car starts to swerve back and forth, spins out of control, crashes into a tree. The father was killed instantly. EMT workers come to the scene, pick up the son, take him to the nearest hospital. They check him out in the emergency room. They're like, wow, he's pretty banged up. He needs surgery. They send him upstairs to the operating room. The surgeon walks into the operating room and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. How is that possible? Now, for those that have heard this before, just sit back and smile. For those who have not heard it, give it some thought. Now, the most popular answers we hear across the country are the surgeon is a stepdad, adopted dad, priest, like some priests you call father, godfather, sperm donor in the mix somehow. All right, but for those of you who have heard this before, what is the traditional answer to this riddle, right? You got it. The surgeon is the boy's mother. Think about it. Father and his son are driving. Father gets killed. Boy is taken to the hospital, up into surgery. The surgeon walks into the operating room and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. The surgeon is the boy's mother. Now, if you didn't get this right, don't feel bad, okay? Many Americans and many of you don't get this right the first time because in your minds, for many of you, when you think surgeon, you think male. And that is implicit bias. That's where it lives. That's where it swims. That's where it functions, right? Unconscious associations between groups and traits that we don't know we have. The reason that many of you and most Americans have difficulty with that riddle and give male-based responses, adopted dad, same-sex dad, stepdad, male-based responses, is because you associate men with being surgeons. Don't feel bad if you do. It comes with the territory in that as you live your life, you're going to be overexposed to certain groups and certain traits and certain groups in certain roles. And upon repeated exposure, your mind will lock in those associations for you. You will not know when it happens. But when it does, the seed for implicit bias is planted. It may blossom, it may not, but it's there. Let's do it like this. Besides Barack Obama, when I say President of the United States, what race comes to mind? Probably thought white. What gender comes to mind? Probably thought male. Now, by you saying white, that doesn't make you racist. By you saying male, it doesn't make you sexist. With one exception, white male presidents is all you've ever known. Throughout the history of this country, in your history books, on your money, you've only seen white male presidents with one exception. We all know that a woman can do the job. It just has not happened yet. So until it does, a woman is unlikely to come to mind when you think President of the United States. Doesn't make you a bad person. It simply makes you human. You've never seen one. Folks, you could be a feminist to the 10th power. And I say president of the United States, you still think white male. Doesn't make you less of a feminist. The mind can only lock in that to which it's been exposed. No one on this call in your state or in this country has ever been exposed to, has ever seen a female president of the United States. So why would you expect one to come to mind? Folks, let me help you out. If you really want to understand implicit bias at a deep level, look at it through the lens of disproportionate exposure. We have all been overexposed to certain groups and certain traits, certain groups and certain roles. Upon repeated exposure, your mind will lock it in. You will not know when it happens. When it does, the potential for implicit bias is established. That's it. Implicit bias is much more about the machinery of your mind than it is the content of your character. That was pretty good. Right? That was pretty quotable, pretty tweetable right there. Pretty good. But the notion is it's not a character issue. Okay. All right. So, but we all have biases. Yes, you. Yes, you. No, you don't. No. Say you're walking down the street. Walking down the street, and a stranger approaches you and says, "Hey, I have a flight tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. from the local airport. Can you come to my house at 4 o'clock in the morning, pick me up, and take me to the airport for free?" How many of you would seriously consider doing that? Stranger. Yeah, not so much. I understand. But say it was a loved one, spouse, significant other, parent, child, best friend, sibling, somebody you cared about, made the same request. How many of you would at least consider doing it? Right? I didn't say would you do it, Uber. Would you consider doing it? Okay. Folks, that's bias. That's differential treatment of another human being based upon a group to which they belong. But we get it. It makes sense. It's cultural, it's functional, it's normal. Not all biases are inherently bad. Depending on the situation, they can be self-protective and functional. You don't know that stranger. They can be a serial killer, axe murderer. You don't know them. But don't sit there and tell me that you think you literally treat everyone in your life the same under every condition. You do not. And it's okay. It comes with being human. We all belong to groups. We all have relationships. We tend to treat our in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members. It comes with the package, okay? So don't beat yourself up, but it is a universal human condition for us to have these associations and thus have these implicit biases. So we all have implicit bias, but the impact of our biases on others depends on the roles we play in society. Say you have 3 people, siblings, all grew up in the same household. All 3 of them develop a negative implicit bias towards Hispanic Americans, okay? If one becomes an architect, one becomes an IT professional, and one becomes a police officer. If you could only train one of those 3 siblings on how to manage or reduce their bias, which one of those 3 would you train? Architect, IT, or police officer? Right? Police officer. Now, the IT person has the same bias as the police officer. But if there's an IT person, maybe they have to serve somebody, go to somebody's office, hook up their machines. If they're Hispanic, maybe they'll do it a little slower, but they'll be okay. If a police officer acts on their bias, someone can end up losing their life. So yes, all 3 people have the same bias, but depending on their role in society, the expression of that bias will vary. That's why we explicitly overtrain police, prosecutors, judges, doctors, nurses, social workers, teachers. Why? Because if their biases play out, somebody's life can be changed. I mean, we train nonprofits, everybody else too, but we dig in deep on those groups because we know the impact that their decisions can have. So, if we accept these 2 notions, we all have biases because we're human, but the impact depends on the roles we play in society. We are golden. Let me give you this real quick. Here are your 2 key criteria for having an implicit bias. You ready? I'll make it simple, make it plain. You ready? But you may want to write this down because this is what we call a takeaway. The 2 key ingredients for having implicit bias. Number 1, living in society. Number 2, having a brain. That's it. That's all, folks. If that applies to you, then yes, you have implicit bias like everybody else. You say, well, no, I don't. No, I don't. I don't have any biases. I don't see race. I don't see gender. I just see a rainbow coalition of humanity. I understand the rainbow notion. It sounds very romantic, but the science does not support it. Okay, folks, if you are a human being, you have relationships, you're taking in the world, let's do it like this. Be honest, be honest. Finish this phrase with the first thing that comes to mind. Be honest, okay? Finish this phrase, okay? Peanut butter and probably thought jelly. Why do you think you thought jelly? Because you live in this society and you have a brain. And in this society, you're more likely to see peanut butter paired with jelly more frequently than peanut butter paired with fish. Doesn't make you a bad person. Simply makes you human, okay? We live in society, have a brain, overexposed to groups and traits. Eventually, our mind will lock it in for us. You will not know when it happens. That's the process, all right? Good. Now, In terms of a deeper dive towards our formal definition of implicit bias, I want to go over a few key terms with you that should be helpful in your work at Glendale, your communities, and so forth. First one, diversity. Now we hear this term all the time, right? Diversity, okay. Formal definition, here we go. Includes all the ways in which people differ, period, full stop. Folks, diversity doesn't have inherent value in those differences. It just says people differ in all sorts of ways. How do they differ? Race, ethnicity, gender, age, national origin, religion, disability, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, education, marital status, language, physical appearance, diversity of thought, ideas, perspectives, and values. We also recognize that individuals affiliate with multiple identities. So folks, if I have 3 shirts, a blue shirt, red shirt, and green shirt, I have a diversity of colors, blue, green, and red. But I like the blue shirt. Makes me feel good. I get a lot of compliments when I wear the blue shirt. I'm inclined to wear the blue shirt. Just because I like the blue shirt more doesn't make it inherently superior to the green and red shirts. It's just different, my personal preference. That's like blue eyes and brown eyes. They're different. One is not inherently superior to the other unless society adds value to one or the other. But in the objective sense, not so much. So we differ in many different ways, but many of these differences are not objectively better or worse. That's like saying, well, 23 is a better age than 22. Better, different, yeah, better, kind of tough. Okay? Diversity, the ways in which people differ. Now, we tend to talk about diversity, race, gender, age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation to a certain extent. But there are many other ways that people can differ. So when you say you want a diverse organization, a diverse workforce, be really clear about what you mean. Right? Next, equity. Providing individuals and groups with the appropriate resources and support for their particular situation that would allow them to experience similar opportunities and outcomes as other groups. Equity is not equality, that is giving everyone the same exact level of support or resources regardless of the situation. Equity is customized allocation or distribution of resources, given somebody's situation or condition. On the next slide, I'm going to show you an image many of you may have seen before in some form, but I think it distinguishes equality and equity in a pretty compelling way. Okay? So the goal here is for all 3 people to watch the baseball game, right? Equality says, let's give them all the same resource. So all 3 of them get 1 crate to stand on. Now, as you can see, this young man here has a great view. This young man here, just right. This person here can't see at all, although he got the same resource as everybody else. So sometimes equality may not be appropriate, may not allow you to achieve the goal. Equity says, let's take the situation into account and then distribute resources. You notice this guy doesn't need anything right at all. He's good. This person needs 1, this person needs 2. They can see the game, the goal is reached. Okay? So some situations call for equality. Other situations call for equity. Okay? It just depends. I would say as you make your decisions, apply both lenses. Let's apply an equity lens, because that may be more appropriate, or equality lens. Okay? All right, so equity, equality. Now, inclusion. So you hear diversity, equity, inclusion. What is inclusion? The act of creating environments in which any individual or group can be and feel welcomed, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate regardless of their role or rank. So when you talk about the workplace or an organization, we want our folks to feel included. I'm talking about from the copy room, from the janitor, all the way up to the director or the CEO. Valued, respected, supported, that sort of thing. If I ask you right now, whatever organization or department you work with, if the frontline staff, the support people, the secretaries, the IT, the copy room, the mail room, frontline support staff, do they feel valued, respected, supported, welcome, that sort of thing? What percentage of them will say, yes, I do, right? And if you're sort of hedging or wondering, yeah, folks, your frontline folks, you don't want them to feel jaded, because they're not included, they're not respected, that sort of thing. Diversity, having different colored bodies in your organization, that's good. Right? Inclusion says we welcome you, respect you. So we have different colored bodies, but we value all your intellect, the resources that you bring to bear. We see you as an asset. So diversity, the ways in which people differ. Equity, customized distribution of resources. Inclusion, value, respect, and support. Now, inclusion, I'm gonna pull back a little bit and give you sort of a macro example around the inclusion piece. Because some people say, like, some folks are romanticizing the history of the United States right now, right? We know we're living in interesting times, to say the least. But some folks say, well, the U.S., American exceptionalism, greatest country in the world, nation of immigrants, that sort of thing. Oh, by the way, that last one, nation of immigrants, that's not true. Yeah. If you are multitasking right now, please stop and hear what I'm about to say. The United States of America is not, has not been, and never was a nation of immigrants. That is factually incorrect. Look at the word immigrant or migrant. To migrate is a voluntary act, to seek refuge or better life on purpose with intent. When you say the U.S. is a nation of immigrants, in the same breath, you are dismissing the Native American experience and the African American experience. Why? Native Americans were already here. They were slaughtered or displaced. African Americans were brought here in chains by force to the worst form of slavery in human history. That is not immigration. Folks, look at it's not a matter of debate. It is a matter of definition, right? The United States of America, just look up the definition and see if it applies to everyone here. It does not. So from this day forward, if you continue to say the U.S. is a nation of immigrants, that's an integrity issue. Because you know better, but you're not doing better. And then a gap lacks integrity. That's on you. But it is factually incorrect. The U.S. is a nation of foreigners, with the exception of indigenous peoples. That's just a more accurate, inclusive statement, right? So saying the U.S. is a nation of immigrants is not inclusion. Indigenous people and African Americans were not immigrants. Saying the U.S. is a nation of immigrants includes 16% of the population. The U.S. is a nation of foreigners, with the exception of indigenous peoples. And even if you go back far enough, indigenous peoples came from someplace else too. But in the modern version, this is the more inclusive approach. I understand the romantic notion of a nation of immigrants. Yeah, I get it. It sounds good. But if people are already here, they're not immigrants. And if people are brought here in ships as cargo, they're not immigrants. So we got to wrestle with this as the U.S., right? The U.S. is a nation of foreigners. We came here under varying circumstances, okay? So for context. Now, here's your homework. A little quick assignment for you, just to flesh this out. The United States is a nation of immigrants, that's the myth. Here's what you do. Look at immigration patterns to the U.S. Just Google it and click on images or click on graph. This is what you'll see. So early 1800s, Irish, Germans, UK, okay. Italians, Russian, Hungary, right around here, Hungarians. Canadian, Mexico, Cubans, right around here, another spike over here. Philippines, China over here, okay. All right. Where do you see Native Americans and Africans? You don't, because they weren't immigrants. You're not gonna find them. They came over as cargo to be bought, sold, and traded. Other folks are already here. So we wanna have an inclusive conversation, right? The beloved community includes everyone, as King talked about. So if you say we're mostly immigrants, so what's your number? If 16% non-immigrants, what does it take? 20, 30, 40? What percentage of non-immigrants will it take for us to sort of embrace the notion that it's a nation of foreigners, exception of indigenous peoples? It's not that hard to say, and it's more inclusive, okay? Now, when we do these trainings, usually in our longer sessions, we'll ask the following question. We'll say, okay, when Americans think of young Black males, what words or phrases come to mind? Now, we make this a word cloud where people can type in their responses and it shows up big words, small words, that sort of thing, okay? But I want you to think about that right now. When Americans think of young Black males, not what you think about young Black males. Think about this like Family Feud, right? If you polled a few thousand Americans, what sort of traits will come to mind when they think of young Black males? Just a few seconds, okay? All right, now I'm gonna give you an example on the next slide of what we typically see across the country. This question. All right, let's take your time, take it in. Now remember, with a word cloud, the words in the largest font size, those are the responses given most frequently. So as you can see here, the most common answers: thug, criminal, dangerous, aggressive, right? That's your cluster, but you have a bunch of other ones: trouble, scary, suspicious, basketball, drugs, thief, fatherless, threatening, rapper, cool dudes. So you sort of look around, just sort of take it in, okay? Take it in. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to literally imagine yourselves walking through life with this or this as your personal brand. That when people thought of you, yes, you, make it personal, they thought this, and what your life would be like. And I need you to sit with this for a second, right? You walk into the office building for the interview, this walks in with you. You walk into the bank for the loan, this walks in with you. You walk into the office hours of that professor seeking help, this walks in with you. You walk down the street past that police officer, this walks with you. Literally imagine if when people thought of you, yes, you, make it personal, they thought this, and what your life would be like. Now, a few things. First, don't deflect. I'll say, oh, what about my group? What about, yes, there's other groups. Absolutely. I need you to be this group for now. Second, this is not a guilt moment. I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. This is an empathy moment. Can you see the world through the eyes of someone different than you just for a moment and imagine what your life would be like? Also, please note, I did not ask you what you personally believe. You may not personally believe any of this, but that wasn't the question. The question was, when Americans think of young Black males, what words or phrases, traits, characteristics come to mind for them? So when we give this poll to people and they provide these answers, even if they don't believe it, it still demonstrates that they've been exposed to it, that it's in their system, whether they know it or not. Okay? And from a social cognition perspective, social means other people. Cognition is how we mentally process information. So social cognition is how we mentally process information about other people. So whether you know it or not, when you see a young Black male, the science shows in the US, when you see a young Black male and categorize him as such, these traits get activated at a conscious or subconscious level. And once they're activated, they can affect how you interact with that person, whether you hire that person, how you engage with that person. And you will not know that it's happening, and you're still good people. You're still good people, just overexposed to groups and traits. In this case, this group and those traits. Don't feel bad. Why? Everybody gives these answers across the country. Doctors, nurses, police, prosecutors, Black males themselves, everybody gives the same answers. So don't feel bad, don't feel guilty if you thought about some of these same sort of traits, okay? But the thing is this, folks, the fact that we can put this on the screen and you thought of them means it's in your system. We are collectively exposed to certain traits about certain groups. Young Black males, we see the same movies, same TV shows, same riot coverage. It doesn't mean that you believe it, but it means you've been exposed to it. And once you're exposed to it, it's in you, like it's in me, like it's in us. Folks, this stuff is in the air, and we're all inhaling. Okay? That was pretty good. That was tweetable, quote right there, pretty good. Bottom line is, it's ubiquitous all around us. But don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. It's about overexposure, okay? Now, a definition of implicit bias. So general bias is sort of a particular tendency, inclination, feeling, or opinion. Implicit or unconscious bias are when stereotypes, which are group trait associations, okay, affect how we think, feel, and behave in an unconscious manner. Now, these biases, which can include both favorable and unfavorable perceptions, are activated involuntarily and without an individual's awareness or intentional control. Basically, implicit bias always starts with a stereotype, the association of a group with a trait. How do stereotypes form? Living in society, having a brain, repeated exposure. And you have thousands of them in your head right now. Once they form, they can affect how you think, judging decision-making, feel, prejudice, liking or disliking somebody simply based upon the group to which they belong, and behave, discrimination, unfair, positive, or negative treatment towards someone simply based upon the group to which they belong, okay? All right, so I'm going through a lot right now. I'm giving you about a half a semester's worth of content in a short period of time, but I'm sure you can handle it, all right? So there's our definition. Now, some findings past 50 years of research, here's what we know. We all have biases, folks, all of us. But the impact of our biases on others depends on the roles we play in society. I talked about that earlier, okay? Implicit bias is more prevalent than explicit or conscious bias because our minds are cognitive thinking machines that encode, that is, take in, and store many associations between groups and traits that we have not consciously processed. You have all types of biases, right? So it's shapes, so it's colors, so it's numbers. In the US, however, very important, when we see those of us born and raised in the US or been here for several years, when we see another human being, your mind automatically attempts to categorize them according to race, gender, and age. Why is that? Folks, our minds are built to be efficient. Thinking in categories is very efficient. If you meet somebody for the first time and they tell you they're a police officer, you don't have to ask them, do you have a gun and a badge? Did you go to the police academy? It comes with the category. So once you know someone's category, a wealth of information comes along with it. In the US, if you know whether somebody's Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male, female, old, young, loaded with information. So your mind is looking to be efficient, so it's looking for categories. Put in the category, gives you information to help you deal with that person in the moment. That process is usually very helpful, but sometimes we can get it wrong. Now, gender and age as a basis of categorization, global. Most countries and cultures around the world categorize their people according to gender and age groups. Race, however, varies from country to country and culture to culture. Now, implicit bias is a stronger predictor of day-to-day behavior than explicit or conscious bias because the vast majority of our behavioral thoughts are automatic. You can have negative implicit bias towards your own group. Why is that? Me as a Black man, if I'm overexposed to negative traits about Black people over and over again, my mind will lock it in. Doesn't mean I hate myself. It just means I've been overexposed. My mind comes to associate the two. And finally, the potential impact of implicit bias on behavior can be overridden by conscious effort. So just because you associate a negative trait with a group does not lock you into mistreating them or disliking them. You can do things at a conscious level that can cut the link between a bias association and an outcome. And I'll give you one or two more examples of what that looks like in a few minutes. Now, question for you. You don't have to answer out loud, just think about the answer. According to the implicit associations test, which is a measure of implicit bias, Americans' strongest negative implicit attitudes are towards which one of these groups? Women, African Americans, the elderly, the obese. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? All right, let's take a look. Here we go. Now, most biases in the US arise from external characteristics such as race and gender. Okay? Arabs and Muslims also a common target of bias, particularly since 9/11. People who are obese, common target of bias, that is true. LGBTQ communities, common target of bias. Undocumented individuals, common target of bias. But actually, Americans' strongest negative bias is toward the elderly, followed by the obese. Why is that? In the US, we have a very strong pro-youth bias. We tend to value the younger version of ourselves and other people. And we associate more positive traits with youth and very negative traits with the elderly, including death and disease. I'm not saying the bias for the elderly is the most pervasive. What I'm saying is the magnitude of it, the gap is the most significant. Preferring young, avoiding old, that gap, huge. Black people, white people, there's a gap not as big. Male, female, gap not as big. Young, old in the US, huge, okay? Next, what does implicit bias look like in the real world? A couple of quick examples. Taller employees have been shown to receive higher wages than their shorter counterparts. Yes. And more attractive people have been shown to receive higher starting salaries than their less attractive counterparts. Here's the deal, folks. If you're short, you better look good. Right? Let's keep it tight. And you can go to the gym, you can work it out, you can be short and good looking. Folks, it's not me, it's the science. Next, qualifications being equal. That is credit score, financial history, income, etc. Blacks and Hispanics were less likely to be approved for home mortgages and auto loans, okay? And paid higher interest rates on loans when they were approved, all right? Next, people who show implicit bias towards Latinos are more likely to oppose both legal and illegal immigration. Hot topic there. All right, my son just came in, he wants to say hi. It's gotta be real quick. Say hello, look at the green dot.
Hello.
What's your name?
My name is Brian.
All right, Brian Thomas Marks II. Good job, brother. All right, I'll be up in a little while. All right, you know how this goes, folks. You just got home from school. Sorry about that. Okay, next. A review of 42 recent articles on implicit bias in healthcare revealed that physicians and nurses show bias in the areas of race and ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, age, mental illness, weight, HIV/AIDS, brain injury patients, individual drug users, disability, and social circumstances. Now, don't judge them. Don't judge. Deuce, I can't do it right now, brother. I'm sorry.
Just tell me.
I can't do it. Deuce, I can't do it right now.
The what? The word. Just tell me the word.
Okay, so don't judge these doctors and nurses. Don't judge them. We find the same patterns in larger society, okay? I'm sorry, folks. We find the same patterns in larger society. But see, the romantic part of you wants to think that doctors and nurses, they can't have bias. They're in helping professions. Why not? Do they live in society? Do they have a brain? That's it. Folks, they don't have bias because of doctors and nurses. They have bias because they're human. But their bias gets expressed through them being a doctor or a nurse. So whatever your occupation is, it can be expressed. Now, you can develop new biases in your occupations. Absolutely. Okay. All right. I'm a little short on time here. Okay. Almost there. Okay. So how do you measure implicit bias? So the IAT, or what we call the implicit associations test, what does it do? Folks, homework, Google this phrase, implicit associations test. The first two links that pop up will take you to the same site. It is a Harvard-based site. Once you get there, there's over 30 different tests you can take to see what implicit biases you have, okay? What does it do? It measures the strength of subconscious associations between concepts or groups, such as Hispanic people or gay people, and evaluations such as good or bad, or stereotypes such as athletic or clumsy. Now, the IAT is not perfect, but it does correlate with certain implicit and explicit behaviors to varying degrees, okay? So once you get there, again, a bunch of tests. I would recommend take the black-white race IAT, one of the gender IATs, and the age IAT, okay? It's completely anonymous. You and a machine, takes about 10, 12 minutes, okay? Now, another way to identify your bias, and I want you to do this weekend, in the next 48 hours. Here we go. Think about someone in your life right now who knows you really well. Spouse, significant other, parent, best friend, sibling, okay. I want you to give them a pass to give you honest feedback about the biases they think you have, okay? And then you listen. without becoming defensive. Why? Because sometimes other people can see your biases before you do. People around you, your friends and family, they're going to notice your patterns, the subtle patterns that you may not pick up on. You take your ego, put it aside, tell them, I want to be better. Tell me what biases, implicit or explicit, you think I have. And then you listen. So 2 ways to identify your bias, IAT, right? And talk to a close other. Again, both of these are free and they're quick. Okay? Now, how can implicit bias be managed or reduced? So folks, this is where I work. This image you're seeing here, this is Morehouse College's, Martin Luther King's alma mater, Morehouse College's graduation. Okay? Morehouse College is the only predominantly Black male college in the world. There are 4 all-male colleges in the United States: Hampton City in Virginia, Wabash in Indiana, St. John's in Minnesota, Morehouse in Atlanta. All right, Morehouse, we're the largest at 2,200. Now, our alumni include Samuel L. Jackson, Spike Lee, Julian Bond, Jay Johnson, Bakari Sellers, Eddie Glaude, and of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Now, even if you never step 1 foot on Morehouse College's campus, you need to know intellectually that this place exists. That there is a place in this world where over 2,000 Black males are getting together in a concentrated fashion, and it's not because they're in prison. There is a place in this world, over 2,000 Black males getting together in a concentrated fashion, doing something constructive and productive. It's called Morehouse College. Just knowing this place exists serves as a data point to counter the negative narrative that surrounds young Black males. Just knowing this place exists. Some of you have never seen an image like this before in your life. A group of Black males graduating from college with honor cords around their necks. Don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. It's about exposure. You've been exposed. So remember earlier, I showed you the word cloud, young Black male, dangerous, criminal, thug. Remember that? Now I'm showing you this to offset that. So how do we undo implicit bias? Balance of exposure. All right? And so it begins. 5 promising practices, reduce implicit bias at the individual level. Here we go. Individuation. You're asking, what can I do? This strategy relies on preventing stereotypic conclusions by obtaining specific information about group members. What does that look like? This strategy helps people evaluate members of the target group based upon personal rather than group-based attributes. Homework. When I say homework, you can jot this down, things we want you to do. When you meet somebody for the first time, you can observe their race, ask them what they do, where they're from, as points of entry. Then I want you to go deeper. Ask about their interests, their hobbies, favorite movie, color, book, musician, clothing, style, tech. Say you met me and wanted to individuate. You can say, okay, Bryant, I see you have on a bow tie. Do you always wear bow ties? Or for special occasions? Is that a clip-on bow tie? Is that a bow tie that you tie? Right? Here's the deal, folks. I love bow ties. I own over 50 bow ties. I can talk about bow ties for 30 minutes with passion. So when you ask me about bow ties, I'm not responding as the professor category, as the Black dude. I'm responding as Bryant, the individual who likes bow ties. Bottom line is, when you see one other person, don't see a representative of a bunch of categories. Okay? Your interaction with them may or may not confirm your previous experience. Be open to both possibilities. Okay? All right, individuation. Number 2, perspective taking. This strategy involves taking a perspective in the first person of a member of a group toward whom bias exists. This is all about empathy. The word cloud, young Black males, I asked you to imagine that was your personal brand. That was perspective taking. Can you see the world through the eyes of someone different than you, just for a moment, and imagine what your life would be like? All right, homework. I want you to watch the TV show, 2 to 3 episodes of the TV show, This Is Us. This Is Us. It's on NBC, comes on Tuesday nights. It has a somewhat diverse cast. You could also do this with the movie Crash. Those are the movie Crash, early 2000s, okay? But both of those releases have diverse casts. And what you can do as you watch it, from scene to scene, you can pause and say to yourself, what if that were me? What if that were me? What if that were me? You could potentially reduce your implicit bias from your couch with a remote for free. Folks, we are not making this hard, okay? That's my alarm. Let me know I got 5 minutes left. All right, here we got that. All right, here we go. Number 3, counter stereotypic imaging. What is this? Imagine in detail, counter stereotypic others. Say, for example, you have a negative implicit bias or prejudice towards Armenians, right? What you can do, take 1 minute a day and think of an Armenian family eating dinner together, some of the pleasant image. Think of a famous Armenian person, Kim Kardashian, right? Or a non-famous Armenian person, a person or friend. The bottom line is, whoever you hold some implicit bias towards, close your eyes for 1 minute a day, try to imagine that group in a positive context, in a positive light, okay? Folks, how hard are we making this? 1 minute a day, in your head, free. You just gotta be consistent, do it every day. The science suggests that over time, the implicit bias may be reduced, okay? Number 4, what can you do? Stereotype replacement. Replace stereotypical responses with non-stereotypical responses. What is this? This involves recognizing that a response is based on a stereotype. Say, for example, there's a math teacher who asks Asian students to join the math club on the first day of class. Say that's me. I'm a math teacher in high school. It's the first day of the school year. Students coming in one at a time. I see an Asian student, like, ooh, Asian. You want to be in the math club? First day. No pretest, no math test, none of that. Just Asian equals math. That's not cool. So what do I need to do? I need to own it. Label the response as stereotypical and reflect on why it occurred. Folks, all right, if you're multitasking again, please stop and hear me right now. If you're doing this work, diversity, equity, inclusion, implicit bias, this sort of racial, social justice, equity work, please understand, right? There are going to be moments where you just have to own your bias. Just own it. This ain't my bias is showing. It happens to all of us. But don't beat yourself up, okay? Because I already told you the driving force behind the implicit bias is disproportionate exposure. So as you reflect, ask yourself, what are my sources of exposure? What am I reading? What am I watching? Where do I live? With whom do I work? Who are my friends? That might explain your implicit bias coming through more so than a flaw in your character, right? So what do you do next? Consider how the biased responses can be avoided in the future and replaced with an unbiased response. So my advice to you, think about what you do at work every day. For those who are working, would you work every day? Or even in your personal life. And try to identify moments of discretion. Moments where your subjective experiences or your biases could play a role in a decision that you make or a task that you complete. And simply ask yourself, is it possible for me to go about making this decision or completing this task in a manner such that my biases are irrelevant? If I'm a teacher in this scenario, I'll say, okay, I'm not asking anyone to join the math club until after I give the first math exam. I give the first math exam, the top 5 scorers on the math exam get the invitation to the math club, clean. What did I do? I changed my practice. I didn't change my mind. Sometimes it's going to be easier for you to change your practice, how you go about doing something, than it is to change your mind. And finally, and this is where I think the inclusive, beloved community comes back in, increasing opportunities for positive contact. Positive contact with other groups can alter perceptions of that group or directly improve evaluations of the group. You want to seek opportunities to encounter and engage in positive interactions with our group members. More specifically, you want to interact with and or develop genuine relationships with several out-group members. Try to get to the point where you learn about their history and culture and can explain it in your own words, right? See, some of y'all, I do a lot of work in California, by the way. A lot of work in California, Southern California, LA County, shout out. DCFS, shout out. Do a lot of work in California, okay, which is state governor and all of people. Now, see, California, I say, oh, we're diverse, we're woke, we're inclusive, we're majority minority. I get all that. That sounds sexy and romantic. I understand. But let's slow down. Because some organizations who say we got 15% Black, 20% Hispanic, then I go into the cafeteria, self-segregation. Blacks over there, whites over there, Hispanics over there, Asians over there, like high school. And then they'll self-segregate whenever they can, okay? So if you want to impress me about your organization valuing diversity, it's not so much having diverse bodies in a building. That's nice, and we want that. That's one level. The next level, don't just count bodies in a building, count relationships across difference. Then we could talk about you value diversity at a high level. But at the end of the day, as I close, if you really want to know, as an individual, if you value diversity, the question is not who are you with in a forced space like work. That's too easy. Here's a real question. Who are you with when you can choose? Once you punch out and you go home, who do you live amongst? Who do you date? Who do you socialize with? Who do you grab a drink with? Who do you worship with? Who do you call when the chips are down? I'm getting a divorce. I'm leaving the job. How diverse is your inner circle of people when you're off the clock? Then we can talk about your value and diversity. You showing up to a forced space like work looks good, but doesn't necessarily mean that much, because of most Americans, once we punch out and we go home, we tend to be around people that think like us and look like us. We live amongst ourselves, date amongst ourselves, socialize amongst ourselves, worship amongst ourselves. The U.S. is a hyper-segregated country, residentially speaking. We go to diverse workplaces, but once we punch out, we tend to be around people that think like us and look like us. So if that's the case for you, don't feel bad. That's the American way. I live in a Black neighborhood. I'm not going to stand up here and be hypocritical, but I try to expose myself to difference when I can. That's your homework. Last one. Homework. Take 5% of your downtime, just 5%, and expose yourself to difference. Watch a foreign film. Watch a documentary you would normally watch. Watch a cable news channel you would normally watch. For as long as you can take it. 5%, 5. The other 95%, you can be around people that think like you and look like you. Fine. It feels good. It won't reduce your implicit bias, but I get it. It's comfortable. But folks, please hear me. If you really want to do this work, diversity, equity, inclusion, you want to stretch yourself, social justice, racial equity, if you really want to do this work, please understand and embrace the notion that growth, true growth, is going to happen at the edge of your comfort level, not within your comfort zone. I just said something there. Growth is going to happen at the edge of your comfort level, not within your comfort zone. Okay? So you want to do this work, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. All right, folks, that is my time. So I want to share this last slide here real quick for resources. So people ask me, what should I do next? So that's the website. That's my personal email. Well, oh, that's fine. Social media, blah, 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 blah. Okay, books. We recommend Be the Person You Mean to Be, Dolly Chug. So Dolly is a social psychologist at NYU Stern Business School. This is on Audible as well. But she talks about implicit bias, day-to-day type bias, and things you can do about it, how good people fight bias. Good people, okay? All right, on Audible as well. And then your classic, of course, is Blind Spot, Banaji and Greenwald. These are the people that created the implicit associations test. They have two excellent appendices here. Is there still racism in the US? And it talks you, spoiler alert, there is, but it walks you through that in a scientific way. When you read about racial bias and social justice, you want to start off reading books by academics written for a popular audience. Why? Because we lead with the science. I mean, the journalists and the novelists, that's wonderful, that's great, but the science is often pretty light, and it's not quite clear to what extent you can generalize from what they're putting out there. Okay, folks? So thank you so much for your time and attention, Glendale. This has been great. Pardon me speaking so quickly. As you see, I have a lot of information to give, but I thank you for the opportunity to share with you, especially around this MLK celebration. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing here.
Thank you, Dr. Marks, for joining us today and for your inspiring keynote address. Next, please join me in welcoming Dominique Holmes, Manager of Behavioral Health Unit at Dignity Health Glendale Memorial Hospital, for a performance of Lift Every Voice and Sing Often called the Black National Anthem. Originally written as a poem, it was first performed in public as part of a celebration of Lincoln's birth on February 12, 1900.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sky of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you, Dominique. What a beautiful voice and uplifting way to end our program. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. And before we end our program, I would like to share some upcoming events that further support the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the city's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Join YWCA Glendale from January 18th through February 7th for its inaugural 21-day Racial Equity and Social Justice Challenge. Through daily emails filled with activities, reading an article, listening to a podcast, or watching a video, and journal prompts, you can enhance your knowledge of racial equity and social justice. This challenge encourages you to reflect on how you can take anti-racist action in your own life. We invite you to join us in our commitment to racial justice by signing up for the challenge today. Please use the provided link on this slide. The YMCA of Glendale is proud to announce the launch of a free program called Neighbors in Dialogue, starting on January 27th at 6 p.m. for 4 Wednesdays. This is an opportunity for community members to engage in dialogue virtually in a safe and friendly space with the overall goal of building a tight-knit community. Strong neighborhoods are built one neighbor at a time. For more information, please contact George Cycli at gcycli@glenymca.org. Join the next Be the Change event with Richard Rothstein, author of The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. Glendale Library Arts and Culture's Be the Change series is focused on inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism. Be the Change events build collective understanding of systemic racism, elevate the voices and stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and inspire our community to be the change. Starting in February, look for Reckoning, Racism and Resistance in Glendale, a virtual exhibition, public art installation, and community engagement project that will examine and respond to Glendale's racist history of anti-Blackness, the resistance to that racism, and our current moment of reckoning. The Arts and Culture Commission is supporting several events in honor of Black History Month, including an artist panel discussion, a poetry protest performance, and healing circles with Black in Glendale. For teens, the library continues its exciting series of video interviews with artists LaQuisha Berry and Shermana Nelson from the African American Policy Forum, an innovative think tank that connects academics, activists, and policymakers to promote efforts to dismantle structural inequality. Children and families can enjoy jazz with the Glendale High School Jazz Band, and then go on a world percussion journey with Delton Davis as he shares all different types of drums and how to play them. Bring a drum, or bucket, or a pop, because you will want to play along. Finally, Glendale Library Arts and Culture has created a Black History Month challenge that children can participate in while their parents engage in the YWCA's 21-day challenge. Children will have fun reading and learning about Black Americans who have made contributions to their professions. This concludes our program for today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to the City of Glendale and the Togetherhood Planning Committee for hosting today's event. Everyone, be safe and be well.